Thank you. So if you are comfortable with your camera on, please feel free to keep it on. But if you'd rather have it off, we are recording the session. And I'd like to welcome you all to this session. This is the ID and AI and higher ed subgroup of the AI and education group. And we are instructional designers mostly who come together to talk about the latest of what's going on with AI in our world. The subgroup was begun by Emily Rush, who is not able to be here today, and she's from Rush University, and many of you probably know who she is. So we're sorry she can't be here. But then she extended this group, and so she invited in and included others. And so it's Lisa Hibbard, who you see here, who's co-moderating today. It's myself, Kim Gruey. I don't know if Larry Hurtubise is here today from The Ohio State University, but he's also part of this group. And then Anya Medvedev, who also is part of this group. And if they're here, please feel free to say hi. And today, we are really honored and excited to have with us David Nelson from Purdue University, who's going to be talking to us about collaboration in AI. And before we begin, and as we give other people a chance to enter the space, we have just a really brief icebreaker, and it's this. In one word, what comes to mind when you think of AI and student collaboration? Just one word. If you could type in the chat, one word, and we could use that as an icebreaker to begin. What do you think of? Promising, possibilities, experimentation, intriguing. All right. Thank you for that. I don't know if anybody's worried, if everybody's hopeful and helpful, but appreciate you self-directed. That's excellent. Thank you. Appreciate you participating in that. David, when you feel comfortable, I am going to now be quiet and even turn off my camera for a minute and just turn it on over to you, my friend. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate you all having me. I am I'm the associate director at Purdue's Center for Instructional Excellence. Been here for quite a while. And for about the last 2.5 years, I've been spending most of my spare time trying to figure out some of the different ways that AI is going to modify our existing educational practice and helping faculty and departments as they explore different ways they're going to alter their teaching. Some of these are pretty radical or significant. Some of them are relatively small. But the one piece that really intrigued me as I'm teaching a class right now on learning in the AI era, and I've been asking my students for the last few weeks, will AI replace that collaborative element? Will it replace the instructors that facilitate it? Will they replace the interpersonal interactions? And so it was a question I'm definitely interested in how people are using or responding to AI in the collaborative in a collaborative sense. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We do have everything here on a Google Drive, so that's accessible to you. And that address, can
I
everyone see?
did put it in there. I put in there for you.
Yes, I saw it. I saw it.
Yeah.
So it is, it'll be on each slide, but you can just go to a bit.ly link. And I'll ask you to go to it because part of what we're going to do is discuss ways in which collaboration and AI are intersecting at your institution and your experiences. So we'll put everything down on that sheet. But I've got a few things that I want to draw your attention to in the shared drive. One of them is, and let me switch over to my the window here. So in the drive, you've got resources. So everything I'm citing will be available in there if it is a downloadable published document. We have the PowerPoints you can follow along. There's links that are in here that you can pursue. And then there is our collective note document. So that's the one that we can open up. And at any time, feel free to just start contributing things in there. My only ask would be that after you contribute something, you put your name and where you're from so we know where it came from and we can attribute it in the future if we're using any of those suggestions. All right, so I'll go ahead and start sharing what I hope to discuss today. And essentially, I'm having a few basic starting assumptions for this, and I want to go over those. One, I'm going to acknowledge that there's kind of an increased trend in the collaborative and peer learning over the last few decades. So we've had a lot of this. A lot of it is encouraged by accreditation, scholarship of teaching and learning. And a lot of it came with its own set of assumptions. And one of those that was that work done out of class is pretty much the intellectual contribution of the student. We could reasonably assume that that was true. We also had a general assumption about written output and the notion that we kind of had a proxy of intelligence or effort or having learned through writing. And if the writing was clear, the person had a high attention to detail. If it was long and cited, they put a lot of time into it. And if it had some profound insights, they'd really thought about a particular issue. But because we're now in the era where AI is really effectively mimicking the expected student output for a lot of the out-of-class work, we are getting into some situations where we could safely assume certain types of work in the past, and we're no longer able to assume those types of work. So part of it is just where are we with AI and what are my assumptions? And then I want to present a few reasons for why this might be concerning and some reasons why we might want to prioritize this in our discussions with faculty and instructors or in our own classes. So there's been a lot of emerging research and it's still kind of being decided and deliberated. So there's just fits and starts. But one of the most recent studies that came out from a Carnegie Mellon instructor and some Microsoft researchers looked at the way that people are using AI in the workforce for cognitive tasks. And they found a really interesting correlation. And they found that if you really are confident in AI, it tends to correlate with lower critical thinking in your actual tasks. And this isn't necessarily indicative of what students are going to be feeling and thinking, but it's a pretty good study. It's got pretty good measures behind it. And so when I saw that, I was a little bit concerned about, okay, we've suspected some of this. So how are we going to experience this in our classes? In 2024, the Digital Education Alliance, I believe, I'm getting that wrong. But some authors from kind of a digital education nonprofit surveyed thousands of students over 16 different countries. And they were actually 50-50 on whether they would be over-reliant on AI, meaning that for every student who thought, yeah, this is a problem, one student thought, no, it's totally fine. I'm never going to be overly reliant on it. But they also overwhelmingly thought they did not have adequate guidance on AI use. So we've got people in the workforce that are trusting AI to a high degree, and that's necessarily or correlationally connected with lower critical thinking on performance tasks. We have students thinking AI is perfectly fine or it's terrible. It's pretty even. And then we have students that are thinking that they don't have adequate guidance on AI use. And part of what spurred this for me in the first place and why I suggested the topic was that OpenAI came out with a student guide for writing with ChatGPT. And that student guide, you can click on the link and see it. I'm going to go ahead and share that screen so that we can see.
Yeah, I was wondering,
Yes.
as you were talking, yeah, thank you, David. I didn't know, I was just getting ready to ask you if your slides, you were sharing your slides.
Was I sharing my slides? I was not.
No, and I should have asked you sooner, and I apologize to you
I'm
for that.
so sorry.
I am sorry.
Okay. Right now, am I sharing the writing guide to GPT? Okay.
You
All right.
are.
Then I'll go back to slides and it's basically the first thing. So if you look at the student writing guide, there's a lot of information in here about how students are to use OpenAI's ChatGPT, but almost all the language is used in removing unnecessary labor from your process without having any sort of educational literature behind it. So it kind of creates the sense and tone of this is all beneath you. Get up to speed on a new topic. So you couldn't do this on your own. You couldn't find information out. And a lot of it is how you're interpreting information. And that's relevant to some degree. But the other variable throughout all this is it's all meant to be done entirely with you and the AI, meaning that there is not any other source or authoritative element in your conversations when you're trying to explore things. So you get feedback on your structure. Chat will do that. Test your logic, see if chat can be a good logical companion. Have a Socratic dialogue with chat. So instead of having intellectual sparring human partners, you just outservice that to chat. Pressure test your thesis by asking for counter arguments. Again, instead of doing this with people, you're doing it with the bot, and so forth and so on. So let me go ahead and share. Okay, now are we seeing a slide? Excellent. Okay.
Sorry,
So
Dave.
yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I had shared it properly. Okay. Um, so those were kind of 4 point pieces, information pieces that had spurred me wanting to think about collaboration and what we're doing. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about why we might want to prioritize collaboration. So there's a growing kind of movement and intentionality about the difficulty that you're supposed to experience when you're learning something new, that your brain is supposed to struggle against this, that it takes cognitive energy, it takes time, it takes back and forth in a process, and it's not just a transactional model. And when we do collaborative student learning, we tend to refine our arguments. We tend to improve some of these higher order thinking, deeper level arguments. And a lot of this comes through peer questioning, 1-to-1 or 1-to-4 or 3 peer questioning, and actually be offering each other questions back and forth. So there's a reasonable amount of evidence that suggests collaborative work has a longer term impact on students' higher order thinking and their ability to look at something very critically. So some of the skills that we tend to prioritize again and again. I'm always reminded of the University of Iowa had a great survey about instructor goals that they put out. And what do instructors want to prioritize in classes? Do they want disciplinary knowledge? Do they want learning how to learn? Do they want to prepare them for future careers? Do they want critical thinking? And overwhelmingly, they always say they want critical thinking. So they're wanting this kind of process. And because active learning and collaborative learning have been encouraged by so many institutions, we're redoing rooms that way. It's been part of that process. But it all came with that assumption that we could give students work outside of class or structure something in class and they would behave a certain way collaboratively. And this is now getting a little bit disrupted. So this is the part where I'm hoping we can contribute broadly. What are we doing? So if we can go to the collaborative document, what are you and your institutions doing to promote student collaboration? So if you can, go ahead and write some things down and make sure you put your name and where you're at so we know. And then if anyone wants to share just in discussion, this would be a great time to do it.
David, as people are thinking and writing, I just would like to say for me personally, until you kind of show that AI writing guide, which I've seen before, I kind of hadn't realized how much in a vacuum we were encouraging each other to be. Even when I think about my own workflow and I just naturally collaborate with my peers and all that, but I do interact with my star is its name, and we work together a lot and talk to each other a lot, and I'm just realizing how kind of weird that is. So I appreciate you starting this conversation.
Well, they're designed that way. I mean, they're intentionally designed to mimic human behaviors and patterns. They're designed to have whimsy. My students are getting quite intrigued with DeepSeek's language and way it says, oh, I remember this or I remember that, and just making its thought process explicit, when really it's just telling a wrapper of you should assume the persona of a person and explain this as if it's a thought process or you working through something. So they're designed to take advantage of those traits we have and the trust that we put into things that mimic human output. So is anyone willing to share maybe some more details about what your institution's doing to promote student collaboration, or ways in which you or your peers are doing that?
I was just going to offer, I'm an instructional designer, and when I'm thinking about student collaboration, most faculty that I work with don't necessarily want to push the student collaboration, right? Because I think there's this dirty word behind group work, what it means. So I can offer that much up, but it's definitely giving me pause to think about what might be available. But I know often, I think that could be a barrier for instructors that I work with is just, you know, I have to draw up a contract and what does that look like? And then I have to manage that when there are issues and disputes between students and groups and who's contributing the most to the work, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot like any other form of teaching that's different than what we've kind of become accustomed to and comfortable with. So I think the COVID Band-Aid that was ripped off in 2020 really showed the discomfort with digital and distance education for a lot of people, but then it forced several people to get into an environment where they thought this is much more wonderful than I would have imagined, or I really like this. And collaborative work doesn't necessarily mean you're turning the entire course over to every activity must be graded, or you're having teams where there's kind of an interdependence where contracts can make a difference. There are many different ways where we could make something where there's some discussion or collaboration and you're expanding on something, and that just reinforces your own knowledge. But part of that process is doing so with others and with peers. So I'm wondering, Kim, would you mind talking a little bit about the social annotation and the asynchronous courses?
Yeah, not at all. I was just typing in there. I saw Cassandra had her hand up though. But one of the things that I love social annotation anyway. I loved that before I knew that it had so many uses. And we do a lot with social annotation in the asynchronous online courses because, first of all, like I don't think it's not like a formal thing they have to write. They're just sort of naturally and organically interacting. And then also they're supposed to like not understand and they're interacting to try to make sense of it together. So it's like it comes from a premise of like, hey, we're learning together. Hey, this is something you have to struggle with your peers. So I mean, that's one thing. And I don't feel like that AI has complicated it too much. I feel like we're actually using that in response to some of my faculty's concerns about student relying too heavily on it. And I noticed Cassandra had her hand up.
Yeah, well, since you mentioned social annotation, I gotta say I love it too. And since before the days of AI, I do allow them to use AI for generating comments. I teach them how to like take a passage and ask a chatbot to explain it in a simpler way. One of my favorite use cases is asking AI to do criticism because when we do social annotations, they have specific types of comments I'm looking for. And one of those possible comments they can do is critique this passage. And that's one of my favorite use cases. But I say, put it in the comments, the tool you used, how you used it. But I was going to share that in group work these days, I teach online synchronous. In the roles that they have, one of the roles is AI navigator or AI detective. And this is someone who helps the group hopefully after they figured out the answer to whatever they're working on, then the next step is going to AI and seeing what AI has to say. And just yesterday, I was so happy that I was testing this out, and the AI response was really bad. And I'm like, okay, I hope this is the response that students get when they're exploring this problem, because we want to show when it's lacking, when it's not nuanced, when it's really missing some of what we're trying to teach. So
An excellent point, Cassandra. It's the annotation is something that I've seen and heard a decent amount about. There's one conference I was at, a Lilly conference on, or excuse me, the ISOTL International Scholarship Teaching Learning Conference. And we had an instructor from University of New South Wales who teaches a 2,000 person business class, and they have moved assessments entirely to annotation. And it is all about the instructor or the students demonstrating on a document how they're interpreting information, what they're doing in response to it. And that has basically obviated a lot of the use of AI in those large courses. So I'm wondering, would the person who, yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to piggyback off that, and not to, I know there are other people who have things to say, but the use of video too in these asynchronous courses, we do a lot of video reflection because it's metacognitive activity that is shown to increase learning and reinforce learning, but also you can't kind of fake your way through what you did. Like talk to us about your process is always what the video reflection is about. How did you come up with the idea? How did you formulate this? How did you write this? How did you create it? What problems did you have? What tools did you use? And that use of video is another way to both humanize the asynchronous courses too, but also to kind of keep that idea in check about the use of what tools you're using with AI. And were you going to call on Eliza maybe? I'm not sure
I
who
was going to
in the
ask
chat.
Natalia because she kind of consolidated several of these together about the trust that students are placing on AI as the authority. Could you talk a little more about that? Are you okay sharing?
Hi, sure. I'm not sure if I have much more to share than I wrote, but basically, I've been experimenting with AI a little bit. I see inconsistent results, but we continually talk about this in class. I don't think at this point it will replace human collaboration simply because, we need to fact check information. However, I teach mostly, not mostly, students whose ESL students who are not native speakers of English. So AI can be a good, support in terms of grammar checks and some suggestions for wording and things like that. But beyond that, for research, I tried to use it. I didn't really like what it produced. There was just too much information, and students could not really sort through that and choose what to include in their essays.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing, Natalia. Anya, can you describe a bit more of the organic collaboration and ways that they're looking at peer review or peer feedback?
Yeah, I can echo Lauren's comment about maybe not very positive reputation of group work among faculty. And some of the things that we have done, I'm an instructional designer as well, and when we are designing courses, we are taking this into consideration first by explicitly explaining to the students that this is how you're going to work in the workplace. So this is a thing that you need to develop, this is a skill to develop, and this is your opportunity to practice that. Then second, maybe not putting as much grading weight on that type of work. Certainly not to base their grade on the peers evaluation only in the very, very, very critical circumstances. And then what I mean by organic, this is something that like a recent assignment was on brainstorming techniques. The faculty wanted to expose students to a variety of brainstorming techniques, and we first asked them to sign up for a certain technique, and then based on their interest to form groups. And without any intervention from the instructor that's what I call organically, to collaborate on the technique in the chosen technique on a certain specific topic that is of interest to them. and then submit as a deliverable, submit what they came up with as a result of this technique. So again, this is something where they still collaborate. There is not much of an like risk to them in terms of grade, but there is still opportunity to critique each other, to come up with the shared understanding, and so on.
It's such a great process, Sonia, and I think because you've identified the key element as giving them an opportunity to demonstrate something rather than making it an organizational nightmare that they have to invest a lot of time in. There's some decent research that just by asking students to provide a self-evaluation, you can get some really good information and some kind of sense of reciprocity. One of our colleagues here uses a sheet at the end of the semester, and they just say, what work did you do? What would your teammates say you did? Who did the most work? And looking back on it, would you have changed anything that you did? And just asking those and knowing that the instructor was going to read it already preemptively told a lot of students, okay, I don't want to have to tell the instructor that I didn't do anything. And that diminished a lot of the group work complaints that students were having because they had that voice that you're talking about.
David, when you asked the question about what are you doing to promote collaboration generally, because I'm, again, as an instructional designer, working only in the asynchronous courses with our faculty. And so collaboration sometimes is a little bit of even a bigger sell in that situation. But I just wanted to say that the technology itself sometimes, though, does lend itself to organizing, because the Canvas groups, for example, or LMS's Canvas, those group setups does allow for small group collaboration in a sort of private way for those groups of students that are working together. So I try really hard, and I've made guides and everything to promote the use of Canvas groups to help you with collaboration and asynchronous learning. It's a challenge, though.
It is. And I think the nature of asynchronous learning is that you're providing almost an exponential increase in structure that you would need to try to encourage students to participate. In the classroom, you have the benefit of their learned experience of a couple decades of behaving a certain way and responding to you in a certain way. Asynchronously, they are used to working however they see fit. So it's definitely a bit more work. I'm curious if anybody has leaned into AI as part of the collaborative process at all.
With my colleagues, yes.
How so?
So I was probably one of the first IDs, along with one other ID, that started to actively experiment with generative AI tools. But everybody else was like, oh, like they were steering clear of it. We didn't talk about it. It was like a dirty word. So the collaboration started. I had this idea of like, well, maybe if I just showcase a tool like Thursday afternoons at lunchtime and just see who wants to come and just invite everybody. So it started like that. And we just introduced like a generative AI tool that would help inform our work in some way.
Okay.
So we just started doing that. And so we probably did about, I don't know, 7 or 8 of them. And now all of the IDs do use generative AI now.
Okay.
So that was a good way to get people to kind of see like these are actually really helpful, because I didn't expect my peers to have the same challenges and perceptions that faculty did, but they really did. So it was really very interesting. I just assumed, hey, it's a tool. Like we probably just need to wrap our heads around it. It's a tool. It's here. It's not going anywhere. But you know, my peers were very similar to faculty in a lot of regard, where they were just like, I'm not an expert. I don't know anything. Who's going to manage this? So, yeah.
Liza?
Hi, I was just going to share one example that I thought was really great of a faculty member at our institution. We're really sort of just encouraging some experimentation, and I run our Center for Teaching and Learning, and one of my instructional designers and myself are running our AI advisory group. And one of the faculty members is doing a really cool project. It's an education course focusing on children's literature through social justice. And one of the assignments that they've always done is a book review. And so she has sort of embraced sort of like some experimentation with some AI tools, and students were doing some work. I guess it could have been done solo, but the students who were working on this assignment, she had it as originally as a group assignment, were experimenting with what AI would say as a book review of this book. And so students were critiquing and editing and comparing using different AI tools. And one thing that she reported was that the student engagement with this assignment sort of taught them about AI tools as a kind of a nice tangential piece, but the students were way more engaged in this type of assignment. And I thought it was a great way to integrate AI tools and to have students working together in a really like critical way and analyzing the work. So I just thought I'd share that.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing it, Eliza. Lisa?
I was going to share that we're piloting Beyond. It's an animation software. And so what I was doing with AI, and I've used a lot, I call them my fiancés because I looked at a lot of different AI tools. But nonetheless, Notebook LM, I decided to put customized resources into Notebook LM with the help of the faculty, and then share that with faculty with their Gmail account, and then also put in there a prompt for a script. And so then they can generate a script for me, just a basic script based on whatever resources they have in Notebook LM. And then once they generate a script with me, then I can do like a quick mock-up, or if I have a few questions. So I'm trying to really look at a workflow in collaboration with both faculty and one of the instructional designers, and that will expedite this for not just for me to get it done, but for the future of this pilot. So we can have a nice workflow, including AI. That's a win-win, time saver, right? For all those things. So that's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
Well, I think what Lauren and Lisa outlined are things that we've experienced here at our institution as well. I've been doing AI presentations for several hundred faculty over the last few years. And the key thing that differentiates the people that feel comfortable integrating this are that they've spent a while trying to have AI do meaningful tasks for them or with them. And then they are much better equipped to evaluate it. And this runs the gamut. So I'm not a proselytizer of any particular approach or interaction to AI, but there are some people that are very, very opposed, and they've interacted with it and said, here are all of the limitations and reasons why it's problematic. There are others who have used it for some of their own planning work. And then there are others who have leaned in, just like Eliza said, where you're really having AI interaction be a critical part of the course or part of the learning. So I think the trends that you're describing seem to go across different institutions. Cassandra?
Yes. Well, my favorite collaborations are actively talking pedagogically about AI, but the best examples I can think of right now are the other stuff like the administrative, developing rubrics. And I really like it when we're at a meeting and it shortens the time that it would have taken us to develop that rubric. And I have a great example from January. We were at this retreat developing rubrics for the strategic plan, and we were into groups, and I was with one colleague of mine, but it was really four of us because I like ChatGPT better and she liked Claude better. So I kept testing it out with ChatGPT. She tested it with Claude, and we kind of meshed it all, like the parts we like better from us, so yeah, it was four of us working together. And there was one group that wasn't using AI, so it's not a research study, but they were the group that took the longest. And they were like, oh, wait, maybe we should start using AI. Yeah.
And that's exactly the kind of interaction that will be meaningful for us, and why when I cited the digital education report, students are overwhelmingly saying we don't have guidance on this. So being quiet about it in class is a really good way to ensure that students are going to just experiment and explore, rather than if you want to engage with it as through a critical lens or as a productive lens. And a lot of it does have to do with what are the time savings and how you're presenting some of your material. Yeah, Nancy, that they did just come out with the pro version. I was wondering, does anybody know the pro version of Notebook, what it gives you versus the free version?
They didn't say in the announcement. I just saw that. And then I just put in what is a new problem with this, that the content providers are blocking the crawlers, which provide the information. So in no,
Okay.
well, like I couldn't get a pasted URL from the New York Times. I mean, I was surprised, and about 5 others block, 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 block.
Okay.
So you have to cut and paste it, so, or copy paste.
Okay. Well, I think they have marketed themselves as the you need not exert the energy of reading. And I have one student in my class who's a very accomplished student and says she uses the Notebook podcast feature all the time for a subject, so she can just get up to speed on something relatively quickly, and she really enjoys it. But a lot of this does kind of highlight some different challenges we have and ways we might promote collaboration. So I just wanted to put together a few suggestions, and a lot of this comes out of a collaborative paper that I've written with a couple of, or 3 colleagues, one of whom is an undergraduate student and went through a learning community about AI and learning and thinking about the influence that it might have on classes. And we were asking them, and I've asked my students for a while, what are the collaborative elements that might improve some of this? And so I've got 4 different references here for you, 4 different leads to follow. Number one thing that seems to be coming across is having student autonomy and input into what is happening in the classroom. And there's a decent amount of evidence that supports, and this is not just a choice of whatever you'd like to do, but different areas where students are really choosing or guiding or influencing the way in which they want to demonstrate their learning, what they want to talk about, how they're prioritizing things. And one way that this was realized, this is a Chronicle article from today, actually, that talks about how students developed their own kind of course outcomes that are individualized over a 100-200 person class at a Cal State, where the instructor said, all I was doing was policing AI, and then I made it very much focused on the individual students' goals and having them realize those things. And even though students may not be able to really form excellent goals that they may not know what they don't know, and they may not have that metacognitive practice, it still dramatically reduced the AI that was being used, and it invited a lot of collaboration because the students were able to bounce their ideas of what they wanted to do off of each other, and it was a natural collaborative environment. So I wanted to share that. I thought that was pretty interesting. The third link here is a page from Colorado University Boulder, where they had a history class and they constructed the AI policy with the students. So there was a discussion about what was appropriate, what wasn't appropriate, a negotiation. And instead of us coming from a point of using our authority without really understanding the full scope of how things might be used, and just telling students, well, I don't care what your other 4 classes said, this is our AI policy. Considering ways that you're co-constructing it, if they feel that they have that kind of voice, that I think it was Anya brought up about that they can really have a voice and have some perspective in this, it tends to improve collaboration. And one of the ways that we are encouraging people at our institution to do this is exactly what Eliza highlighted, where you're telling them about the tools, and we're encouraging a bit more algorithmic literacy than we are AI literacy. And there's a few reasons for that. One, AI and what it means changes very, very quickly, and the ways in which students will ascribe the term to any tool are going to change pretty quickly. And so things that we could focus on for a specific tool may be out of date fairly soon. But the whole point of this is algorithms. So things that are decision trees that are meant to infer, that are meant to provide an output for you. When students can get an educational aspect on how a decision tree is repeating an output, they have a vastly different affective view of what these tools are and what their utility is. And even students that are well acquainted with it may not really fully grasp the concept or consequences of algorithms, but they definitely know they exist and they definitely have opinions on their use. So we found that those four things together can really increase collaboration in the classroom, and none of them require really heavy lifts. But the last one is one where you kind of need to determine whether you think this is your job to teach algorithmic literacy and to talk about the consequences of algorithms. But we found that most instructors have really clear opinions because they're experts on interpreting and evaluating information. And that's what algorithms are supposed to do. So they can critique it really quickly and easily. And they sometimes forget that students can't. So it doesn't make, so they tend to get activated by that actual option. And like everything else we've talked about, doesn't need to be throughout the entire course. Can be a few exercises here or there, but it does tend to increase that engagement that people are looking for and make it more likely that the students are going to receive some of those benefits. So that was kind of the broad framing I had, but I'm more than happy to have other people, what thoughts this spurred in you, if anything, what things are happening at your institutions or that you're doing that you want to share, and just kind of open it up to the group.
Yeah, I wanted
Maybe
to
if I
share.
may.
Oh, Nancy, go ahead.
It was Kim, and you go ahead, Anya, please. We want to hear from you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted to share just my in Georgetown, we are about to launch the Artificial Intelligence Management program. So as an instructional designer, right now I'm working with 4, 5 courses with the AI specialists, with the experts in AI. So this is a very interesting experience that I'm having, and something that when you asked David about the activities or things where there's where we are relying, faculty is relying on AI. So those are the courses when we really heavily rely on AI, and there are activities such as like simulated interviews, for example, whether students are asked to create like an interview guide. It's a research in the research as a research process. Create an interview guide and then do a simulated interview with the AI, not with the real participants, but with AI, with the purpose to then update and revise and improve your interview guide and the questions to make more clarity when you do go about and interview the real participants. So this is just like one example, but one interesting thing that when working with those experts is that they say, oh, sometimes we just turn it off. We turn off the AI features because we don't want that to be in the way in a certain point. So I think that the idea of managing that, right, when it is appropriate, when it's helpful to rely on it, to lean on it, and when it's helpful to completely turn it off, also takes practice, as David mentioned, and also self-regulation, self-awareness.
Thank you, Anya. That's a great example. I think that some of the disciplines that have professional outcomes in mind or are working predominantly with professionals have a lot easier time doing this because they can say, here are disciplinary standards or industry standards or things that you're going to have in your practical need very, very soon. I think one of the challenges we get is, what do I do with the second-year students in my plant biology course that the college decided everybody was going to have to take? And how do I get that kind of openness and let them know, here's where it's good to do things, here's where it's not. And a lot of that has to do with if you follow a transactional model, of knowledge distribution or banking, it's going to be much more likely that students are going to ignore any guidance about AI tools. They're simply going to use them to accomplish things. But for those professional disciplines, it can be helpful to, bring in people who have had those experiences and they can talk about it a little bit more and say, yeah, here's why I don't use AI. But that clarity and that distinction can really, really help.
I work with mostly English professors, and of course, composition is a field that is difficult to parse in this world because, it used to be, because like I believe Ethan Mollick yesterday or the day before got some AI to write an entire dissertation. And it only took a little bit of time, not the years it usually does. And so, asking people to really rethink what it means to demonstrate knowledge and to rethink what it means to develop a skill, that's really challenging because like we're already experts. So I can interact with AI and I feel where it's dead or lifeless or not human or not thinking and it's boring and dumb. And I can, trigger it and try to get it to do better. But young, thinkers, new thinkers, developing thinkers, that's not a skill that's in place. So that's where I think the problem is, and that's the area where you're saying I think collaboration, if we could like compare this AI output to this human output as a group of humans together and talk about that, because I do think some students think AI is perfect and this is polished English, so it must be good. It's like, well, yeah, it's grammatically sound, but it says nothing. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because that's why I'm really excited about this talk today to get more ideas for how to use people more with the AI.
Cassandra.
Yeah. Following on what Kim said, I think that's a big challenge. I would like to think I can teach my students to see how AI is superficial or the just kind of not nuanced in the way that I want them to be, but that's the goal of their whole higher education and beyond, right? And certainly not something they would know at the beginning. I have found some gamification fun, like posting different responses in a Padlet. This works well online synchronous, where students add their response and I add AI responses, and they have to guess anonymous, right? Which ones are AI, and then we talk about it. But yeah, a lot of the time they find it's very smooth. It sounds good, and okay, that's what I'm supposed to sound like too. This is a big challenge. I mean, one of the big challenge of all of this. When I'm reading work too, like I know many of you, I kind of like it when there's typos now and mistakes. It feels like, okay, this is more human. And you can get the AI to make typos and mistakes. And in some of my games, I even get it to do that. But it's yes, perfect. It's another way of also teaching. Perfect is not what we're looking for. Smooth is not what we're looking for. We're looking like David has been saying, critical thinking. But how do you show that? How do you teach that?
Natalia?
In terms of comparing, I like to give students AI is a good summarizing machine, right? Summarizing, paraphrasing machine. I have one assignment where I have them look at student written summaries on a particular topic, and then I give them AI written summaries, and they can see the difference. Again, the dead language, AI is missing human context, there's a good article that I use that actually there's a commentary on the changes in society. So AI is totally missing that. So they can really see and compare. And then one thing I also like to do is talk to students about how AI really does say nothing other than general statements. So again, we look at the paragraph and analyze, where's the supporting details here. So they start seeing those differences between human writing. And I think for ASL students in particular, a lot of them do feel insecure about making mistakes in writing. So my message to them really is you do have the experience that AI does not. As a human, you can do better than AI. Yes, you can use it to, let's say, create a smoother topic sentence or thesis statement, but then think about how do you know what you know? How do you believe what you believe? Is it coming from your experience? Have you read it somewhere? Include those details. This is what makes writing good and interesting.
I was wondering if you all had seen the SNL parody of using the LLM podcast in a classroom or not. I think some of the things that we talk about are really lampooned very well in the video. Not that we have to watch it together or anything, but some of the things that we're talking about, just I thought it was something fun you might want to look at.
Natalia, is that an
David,
old hand or a new hand?
I think that's an old hand.
Okay.
Natalia, is that an old hand or a new hand?
I'm very sorry. It's an old hand.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the contributions and the suggestions. And it's been neat getting to meet several of you virtually. And please keep things coming to the listserv because it's always helpful to get information about what you're doing. And please keep coming to the events.
Yes, please do. And again, I want to thank David, or we want to thank David for being here today. And the collaborative document, please go back to that, and the slides are there as well. I'd like to take just a minute before we go just to hear from Anya about next month's ID and AI and higher ed subgroup. And if Cassandra wants to plug the custom bots one more time as well. So Anya and then Cassandra, please, and then we'll end it.
Yes, please mark your calendars on March 13 at 3 p.m. Eastern. We are going to discuss the future AI in higher education, very broad topic. Our wild predictions with expert Emily Laird, and she will explore how AI will transform higher education over the next two decades. She is an AI integration technologist at the University of Wisconsin-Stout and University of Wisconsin System, where she works to advance AI literacy and integrate emerging technologies into curriculum. I put the registration link to the chat, so you can register now and also look out for more information.
Thank you, Anya. Cassandra?
Yes, and coming up on March 11th is the subgroup on custom bots, and we happen to feature for this month an instructional designer. I'm really excited to hear from her. She's Renee Parker from New England University, and I've seen some of the work that she was doing with custom bots in the classroom and integrating them into her teaching, and it's a lot of fun. So all are welcome to join us.
Yes. And thank you again, David, for your talk today. It was a really rich discussion. And as someone put in the chat, learned a lot more today from the humans than from discussing this in Gemini. So that's good news for us. Thank you, David.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.